All right, guys, here we go. We are underway with the second best of 3, day number 2 of the qualifiers for Age of Empires 4's Pro League. 3 versus 3. We open up, as usual, on Dry Arabia between Ethan fans and Genesis Gaming. Genesis Gaming, of course, being manned by Niroxs, Revnak, and BlackWidow, and they even are nice enough to put GG in their name so that you can actually differentiate them. That's not them giving up the game early, it's just them letting you know they're part of the Genesis side. Meanwhile, their opponents, the Ethan fans, will be built up of State SC2, Erik and Kelazhur. Now, you might notice some of those names if you are a StarCraft fan. Any StarCraft fans in the house? I'm sure we've got a few. This is a nice branch over. I see a lot of people coming over because these guys definitely did. Kelazhur especially is the most notable one here because he has earned $180,000 competing in StarCraft. For reference, guys, if we were to whip up the numbers for Viper, Viper being the GOAT of the Age of Empires community, considered the best player in existence, at least in AoE 2, $213,000. That shows you just how much there is to bank in the StarCraft scene. And yet Kelazhur, he said, no, you know what? StarCraft is cool, but really what I want, really what I love is some AoE. I'm going to sink my teeth into it. I want my slice of that $20,000 prize pool pie. Of course, he's not on his own in terms of earnings. State SC2 has earned a decent amount. If I recall correctly, I'm just going to whip up the numbers instead of throwing out a blind one. I believe it was, yes, $16,999. I don't know who paid him specifically $99 or $999. They just really want to scream out that $1 extra to put him at $17,000. And then, of course, rounding out, we're going to have Erik. Erik, for reference on the leaderboard right now, is doing fairly well. Up at 34th place. Yeah, this guy is no pushover. In fact, none of these players are. I've regularly seen these GG boys, the Genesis Gaming boys, breach into the top 100 over and over again, sometimes top 50. I think at one point, I even saw one of them crack top 20. And of course, Kelazhur, he's had a Smurf as well as his primary float up into that top 30 more than once. And State is a little bit lower. I think he started to gain some ground recently, but he's sitting down in 200th place right now. I think that's because State took a little bit of a break. He wasn't as hard on the grind as certain other players here. But yeah, this is going to be a very highly skilled lobby. Like, this whole day feels like it's going that way, right? We just got delivered in that regard in Series number 1. Highly talented players all around. And Series number 2, I don't expect it to be much different. And something we haven't talked about because, I mean, you guys probably get tired of hearing it over again, right? It's the same opening. It's going to be France, Mongols, and Rus. Just seems to be the optimal choice for Dry Arabia. Incredibly powerful. When you play Dry Arabia, the importance is that you have the raiding capability. And that's exactly what you get access to with this free civs in conjunction, because they all spam cavalry units quite easily. Oh, wait, just to clarify, Erik's Ethan, right? Chat's just informing you. Thank you, guys. Yeah, I'm familiar with Iaguz. I'm a big Iaguz fan. In fact, like, I featured him several times on the channel before. This guy is incredibly talented. So I'm kind of excited for game number 2, especially then. Because you never see HRE in game 1. But I can tell you for a fact, this guy is easily top 5 HRE in the game. This isn't, right? This isn't, is it? I'm being baited by chat. I'm reading wrong. Okay, that's fine. So Erik, I couldn't find anything on him, though. So I assume, presumably this is like a different named account. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, judging by the profile picture, I have seen this guy before. I'm going to double-check the names. It's Lacone. I knew I'd casted this guy before when I saw the picture. Well, hopefully if they're Ethan fans, they'll at least actually slay it at the HRE, because someone on this team must have been taking notes. Guz has been taking a little bit of a break. He has started to resume playing Age of Empires recently. Hopefully we don't lose him back to the StarCraft community. I'd love to have him hang around, as definitely one of the most interesting players I've got to watch at Age of Empires so far. But let's focus on the players in this lobby, because right now tech ups are kicking underway. Only 2 players remain to get up. And it is going to be actually just the French and the Mongol players lagging behind by a tiny bit. Now, let's talk compositions and likely outcomes here, right? So, for a start, State has started as the Rus player on the flank. And I believe this has been not matched. Yeah, Niroxs took the center. This is a very interesting differential, actually. So, typically, some teams prioritize putting the Rus player in the center so that he can be greedy and rush Castle Age. I'm of the opinion that outside certain pocket strategies and rushes against you, it's not worth sacrificing the greed spot for the roots because their greed is so confined. By 10 minutes, they're starting to actually bring out the units they greeded up for, right? Meanwhile, if you station your French or your Mongol player in the center, they're able to actually get so much value. I think especially the French player. I'd say, if anything, Kelazhur should have been flank, Erik should have been center, and then he could have doubled up on the TCs and then scaled into the mid game with the Knight spam. But instead, they've chosen to go for the Mongol player in the center. I pray to the gods that they're not going to engage in trade, and considering I see a Deerstone here, the gods have answered me. I have seen a few attempts to spam out the trade routes, and it was incredibly depressing and underwhelming every time I saw it. But yeah, we'll see what the intent is. Because as I said, usually when you have this play in the center, they are going to be your greed factor. One cool thing they could do here, by the way, is State could actually invest in the Pro Scouts and he could drag some carcasses over. We've already seen this a handful of times coming out from the Roost player, right, providing for his teammate. And it would enable them to go into the Magadai, which could easily be an option considering Kelazhur has opened up with an archery range. An archery range that is just, for the moment, producing archers. I think the intent behind this, by the way, is when you look at this composition, he's the only one likely to have any infantry coming out of his production buildings. So he wants to unlock the ability to drop battering rams when they reach the enemy base. So I expect him to build up a decent quantity of archers and then look to maybe switch into Magadai for the raiding potential. It all depends if State does donate a few corpses to the Mongol base, though. So far, not looking like he's going to, though. Speaking of donating, though, it's a lot of those. Niroxs is dropping off for France. I really like this play. I think this is a very underrated play. So Mongols is definitely one play. I think you have to do this for one play or the other, especially if you're the central Rus player. Like I said, it doesn't make sense taking the greed spot for a Civ that is actually greeded and ready to go at 10 minutes, right? So instead, the way you negate this and you kind of complement your team is you either provide resources to the Mongol in the south, in this case, or the France player in the north. He provides it to BlackWidow because BlackWidow is a lot closer, whereas Revnak's a bit more on an island. There's a lot more distance to cover. And the whole point behind this is that this will now allow BlackWidow to reach critical mass of knights quicker than his opponent, because when we look on the other side, with this French player being all the way in the south, unless he goes pro scouts himself, he's not going to easily get access to that food booster because you do gather quicker from deer than any other land source, excluding boar. Castle stage reached. First by Niroxs, so he makes it up. He makes it up ahead of State. State, in the meantime, just about to be done. A lot of villagers invested in this. Remember, you get diminishing returns when you add more villies. It's not a direct double conversion. It's not when you add 2 people, you get 3 times the build speed. The numbers are roughly around 1 villager, of course, being 1 times build speed. I think it's 4 villagers for 2 times, and then 10 villagers for 3 times. Rough numbers there. Apparently, it works kind of similarly to Age of Empires 2, which is clear diminishing returns as you add more people. That's why, like, say you have 3 buildings to build, 3 archery ranges, right? It's more efficient to send a villager to build each of them than it is to have 3 villagers build through each of them queued up. BlackWidow riding in, actually catching him in the middle of building his archery ranges as well. That's a really good time to strike. This hurts State a lot. He's already behind on the tech up, and now he actually can't get the bulk of horse archers required to repel his opponent. Really smart move out of BlackWidow, and looking just as vicious and dangerous as the spider he's named after. Meanwhile, up to 2 horse archery ranges over here in Niroxs' base. Moving towards the south side, I like this idea. Going to pivot around and try to assist Revnak. Also, with this, he can actually look to gather up the carcasses nearby and bring them over to Revnak's economy. This is really cool. Meanwhile, moving in. Nice pressure out of Kelazhur. Early into the archers, he punishes the green. Niroxs didn't get the wooden fortress down, and he needs assistance now. Wraparound coming in from behind from Revnak. Revnak actually mounting the count. And with the assistance of the TC and a few horse archers, Kelazhur will lose his force. Meanwhile, the raid's going back and forth between the French knights. Erik now getting his force out and drawing the attention of BlackWidow away from the base of State. Really important detail here. Will now allow him to scale up without being vulnerable to dive in from the French knights. With a calming moment, now they can start to get the numbers together on both sides. There's a movement into the south. I like this out of State. This is what I want, guys. This is so beautiful. This is what high level teams do. It's something that I've been missing out of a lot of these kind of contenders that get booted out by better teams very quickly. You're not complementing your opponents. You're not helping them. I've seen plenty of games where there's this super suboptimal play, such as, for example, 2 players on the same team going pro scouts. When you have a Roost player on your side, you shouldn't ever be doing that. The Roost player tends to spam out so many scouts, he can cover you all. And it's all about the gives and takes, right? In return, you might have this situation where the Roost player gets to be more greedy and the other players hang around a feudal to cover you. But then the counterback, the assistance comes in the fact that you provide food for their economies later. All right, all the starving kids. Right now, they're Oliver Twist, but instead of criticizing them for wanting more, you're that nice guy who just piles it onto their plates. What a nice guy. Niroxs. Has he been doing the same still? Yes, I believe. What? Please, no. I can't quite. Yeah, okay, he has. They were hidden. I wasn't sure for a second. I was like, I swear to God, if he ran away with all of Revnak's booty, I'm not going to be happy. But he has been being reasonable. It's cool as well because they're mirroring it, right? So you're not going to get this exploitive nature where someone gets ridiculously absurd value out of having pro scouts, right? It's going to be balanced in that regard. And something we never even talked about is the fact that State, he managed to actually crack the 3rd tier bounty. Niroxs did as well. So they are both actually getting the best gathering rate, right? And it also opens up that possibility later on that you could actually fall back into hunting cabins and look to scale into knights. I don't expect it this game, mainly because Mongols exist, and it's already a 100 wood deficit to invest initially in putting down these hunting cabins. But when you talk about exposed structures that are out in the middle of no man's land, that's juicy for the Mongol players, right? They get 100 resources for burning those down, and if no one's there to defend them, it's easy peasy. And now a secondary TC out from BlackWidow on the north side. Meanwhile, south side not being matched. Instead, Erik with a very condensed economy in State says this doesn't belong to you. He gave him a few deer carcasses. He says the rest are needed for the Russian war machine. See ya. In fact, it might even be that he's giving these over to Kelazhur. Yeah, this is for Kelazhur. When I see this many archery ranges and I see no passages, this is all going into the bank of Kelazhur. And he needs it right now. Knights on the front. State and Erik, really strong front line here. Very mobile one as well. Like, Revnak is forced into an uncomfortable situation away from his base in an archer-archer composition. You don't have a front line yet. You're out of position in that regard because BlackWidow went to flank to the south, and now he's so far away that reinforcing is difficult, and it means that Erik can easily hold him there. But he's trying to split for raids. He's going to sacrifice a lot of knights by doing this, but the whole point is he's looking to put dents in multiple players' economies. I wonder where the pivot play is right now. So we're going to see more archery ranges being dropped, so both sides just commit in the same way, more or less. I'm looking for that switch up. 3 players now teched up into castle, 2 of them being on the side of Ethan fans. Does give them a slight edge here. And they're just waiting on Erik. Erik, if he can boost up, with the way he's starting to hold back against the aggression coming out from his French counterpart, he could get quite spooky quite fast. But he needs to be quick with this because he's going to be outscaled, remember, due to BlackWidow dropping that second TC. That second TC has now been scouted, by the way. The problem is BlackWidow still has a lot of knights up here, so punishing him isn't easy, but here goes Erik. There's the main contingent. They're away from home and they're raiding. Revnak now castling up. So just 2 players remaining. Both the French players hanging around. But the difference is the pressure is on BlackWidow here. Erik is relieved in his base now. So he can just scale to his heart's content. He can be greedy if he wants. And he can just try to choke out and punish BlackWidow for going for the second town center. Meanwhile, Niroxs, nice move there. Dropping off more carcasses to prevent this exposure as you have to move out the berry bush lines. Really important right now, as at this stage, BlackWidow, he's capped on food. He can't afford more knights, and he definitely can't afford to tech up. But when we look on the other side, look at Erik. Erik's about to crack it. That's why he needs to get out. Can't lose too many troops here. He doesn't want to have to reinvest in the knight army. He wants to get that tech up. He has got surplus for it, so expect it to be underway, and there it is. Royal Institute coming out. Royal Institute is the play. Too many people play in these one-on-ones, and they always go for Guildhall. I agree Guildhall is fantastic, but there are certain situations where you be Royal Institute. One is in these 3-on-3s in open maps, because they're usually over before Imperial Age comes into the picture. And then 2 is when you're in one-on-ones, if you are behind your opponent, like your tech up is behind set by, say, 2-3 minutes, or you're militarily outmatched, this is where Royal Institute is fantastic. Getting access to those researchers, and cheaper as well, by the way, before you're meant to be able to research them, via Imperial Age level 1s, right, is a huge booster to your Castle Age power spike. Niroxs now with the second TC, scaling up. Meanwhile, on the other side, no similar move out of State. So State's sticking on the 1. is looking to gather more of these relics, and they are looking to take control of the sacred sites. This is cool. Look at this. State, he's walling all these up. Yep, on the south as well. They already have an outpost in place, so they're going to force their opponents to come to them. This is a really smart move. Not enough players do this. They just focus on landmarks, and they focus on economy. Don't do that. If you have an edge, focus on drawing your opponent out before they reach their power spike. This makes you very uncomfortable if you are on the Genesis gaming team, right? I believe one more sacred site needs to be captured. In the meantime, BlackWidow still suffering, the only person not to tech up. And we just recently saw what happens when one France player lags behind. You have to respect the power spike. This Civ bounces back hard when you approach late castle into Imperial. That's where they're incredibly scary, right? Before that, it's all about running interception and fuel age. But once you get that space to become the powerhouse yourself, you dominate this type of matchup. You're all that anyone can talk about. These horse archers, they'll fall off. The Mongols, they'll be cute on the side, but their power spike is castle. And also, it should be pointed out that the Mongols don't typically, most of these matchups, get as much value because the maps are so big. And the whole concept behind the power spike of the Mongols is to start a castle with siege weapons. If you're already in place for a siege army, you will close the game. But if you're talking about midfield fights, back and forth, skirting left to right, you're usually just going to be like a disadvantage, right? You're going to be Benny Hillsing trying to always be in position. And really, you're just not playing in your optimal scenario. So Kelazhur, with this static army, still holding the mid ground. If he's forced off this, it becomes uncomfortable. But right now, in good position. Knights out of position from BlackWidow. Going to be chased away. Can't even turn around. Vetted up over. So if he clashed right now, well, he'd be lucky if he got through half of those Knights. It's quite funny, really. Usually the team that doesn't want you taking sacred sites does this walling, but the shenanigans out of State. State hasn't even begun on the southern one just yet. You can at any point. They haven't bothered to trip cap, so they're not really applying maximum pressure here. They're giving a lot of wiggle room for Genesis Gaming to build up and prep. The fact that you've taken 2 sacred sites and haven't committed to the third yet tells your opponents what you want to do. It's almost like you're faking it just to get the resource trickle without fully forcing the hand of your opponents. Like you're somewhat paranoid of what they'll do. Revnak in the south. Yes, there it is. I was wondering if this would happen, right? There's no pressure on the south side, so he's exploiting this to go for a secondary TC. This is quite late, though, and you're about to be heavily pressured. This might cost them more than they net from it. Here we go. Revnak, small force here. Not really contributing much. Niroxs in the blue, trying to match State's count in the horse archer front, but even on the home field, State with a slight lead. And with the siege weapons building up, this is where Kelazhur will reign supreme. Gets the outpost down as well. A lot of players have been neglecting this. This is a huge deal. That movement speed, that flexibility, means you're not a static force anymore. It'll mean that your spearmen are getting closer to being heavy cavalry speeds, right? 1.44 movement speed compared to 1.62 is fairly negligible when you're trying to chase into places. And moving in. BlackWidow in trouble. He did tech up in the end, so he has another building sacrifice, but this is not the play. He went Guildhall. BlackWidow, the one under pressure and the one being most greedy, even exceeding the greed of Revnak with the secondary TC. He's in trouble. Knights have to wait. He needs to tech up. Is he doing it safely? Yes, he done it on the back stable, so he will reach real knight status. Right now, the count being 17 compared to the 16, but so many horse archers here, and the Mangonel's the difference maker now. Revnak caught out of position, able to back away just in time. Mangonel's shot's going to hurt a little. And now all sacred sites have been capped. So triggered victory condition at 19 minutes in. But I don't think they even need that victory condition. Main TC is about to be exposed. Rams are in with the stables. This is going to slow you down. You're weak right now, right? You can't easily get the new units out. Your economy is a little bit stunted after you went up to castle last. And what you need right now is more knights, but you might just be denied at every turn at this rate. Horse archers trying to deal with the Rams. That's not good enough, though. That's just a distraction. The main fight's underway. Lance is being baited in. Mangonel shots coming out. The split up from State is good. He's microing effectively here. He's going to bait them into Kelazhur's military line. He doesn't care, though. It's good trades. The crossbowman can hold out against the Knights. Erik backing away. They'll look to regroup and re-engage. They're giving a little bit of ground over. The Knight line for BlackWidow is folding quickly, though. The horse archer count evening up in the meantime, but the Mangonel is going to make the difference. The split up by Niroxs is trying to protect his numbers, but he's still losing a lot. Has to back away, and he's starting to cluster up once more. Erik renews the charge in, uses them as bait and a distraction to try and cluster up Niroxs' forces, and now they can move in again. And Erik still with some knights to work with. Black Widow's army has been wiped. He is a liability, and that is enough to allow Kelazhur to build the Rams again. Once more into the breach, not letting up the pressure. Knowing that also Revnak, it takes him too long to reinforce. If he's going for static forces, they have to run the length of the map. And that might be too slow, which means the only difference maker can be Niroxs. And Niroxs right now, he's in the middle of a transition. He's switching over to a new wood line. That leaves him weak. Look at the numbers right now. Niroxs has saved up enough wood, but he needs wood being pushed into farmlands. He doesn't have the room for it because of the way he's condensed his economy in his military district, which means that he can't actually keep up with the production rates of state. More ground being forfeited. Calming moment. Kelazhur says there's no rush. Take your time. After all, they're the ones that have to come to us, especially when you start taking out their TC expansion. All this farmland at the back is desperation now for BlackWidow. If this ever gets sniped, he's out of the game. And it could be sniped, remember. We're talking cavalry, cavalry, cavalry. Supported by a few little pew-pew lads on foot, but the primary detail here is horse archers and knights. They will dive more than Phelps. And with the Mangonel army building, this is the siege creep. This is the power of this type of civil composition. Abbasids and Mongols, this is where their power lies. If they ever get a foothold, if you ever move past that dance of death in the midfield, if you ever let them on the outskirts of your base, they will push you to the limit. And that limit might be broken very soon. TC now down, most of the infrastructure gone. He's trying to build more farmland, but where's your military district? How do you even build an army? Even if you can afford it right now, you wouldn't have the buildings to do so. And Erik baiting them out to the side for the moment. The Ram getting through the last of the stables, and no one set fire to. These Mangonels so fantastic at burning buildings from range with little risk. The Rams are more just about vision and that extra little bit of boom to put you over the edge. And it's going to force an engagement. They chase in. Lancers in a bit too deep. Erik holds the Knights back. Horse Archers flanking from the side. BlackWidow in full retreat with the Villager army. And the wraparound Niroxs splits his forces into two groups, but the Mangonels can easily pick them apart. Targeted fire coming in. The front line is gone. They'll fall back, and Niroxs does not have enough horse archers here to hold. State, he ripples down. He looks to cut off reinforcements, and it looks like they're going to give up. GG comes out. Game 1 will go the way of Ethan fans. Welcome back. Game number 2. Game number 1 going the way of Ethan fans, but Genesis Gaming, although they are up against the wall, they are not out. We are about ready to get into Game 2, and it's not Hill and Dale. We get something different. It is gonna be Danube River. Here we go. Now, Danube River, I haven't had a chance to really see much of this in 3v3s. I've seen 1 or 2 people practicing on it, but this is the first time we get to see it in the AV4 Pro League. So I'm excited to see what kind of compositions are going to reign supreme. Because when you look, we have a lot of deviation compared to the Hill and Dale opening. Hill and Dale, Undisputed Kings, HRE in China. You always pick them. They're too damn good. This time, though, look at the split. We're going to get England on both sides, and that is the only comparative. Meanwhile, Genesis Gaming will round out their roster with the Abbasids and the Chinese. And in the north, we will see Delhi and HRE to round it out. Now, this is interesting. HRE could really be the critical difference. We said we wanted to see it as well, right? These guys call themselves Iaguz fans, Ethan fans. Prove it. Do this. Pick HRE, because here on this map, they're surprisingly effective. For a start, usually there's enough relics split towards you can easily grab them. And when you're backed up by Delhi, you do have the ability to initially gain control over the water straits and then get access to those relics. Because remember, everyone else might be a lot slower than Erik is going to be going up into castle. And in that timing, when you're like transitioning, trying to be hard on the water, trying to defend feudal age waterfront, right, countering out the fishing boats, that will buy a lot of time and a lot of tension on the water, which should allow Erik to easily gobble up as many of those relics as he wants as the HRE. Now, we should talk about potential counters to his gathering. There is no Rus in this game. Rus is one of the big ones. Like the S tier, like gatherers of religion are going to be HRE and Rus. Something they do have in this game, though, is the Delhi on the side of Ethan, right? So that's 2 of the best religious civs on the same team. There isn't really a counterplay on the other side. None of these civs like to play into the religious side, right? Because for a start, you have to build these insanely slow units that cost 150 gold, and you also have to pay 200 wood to access the bund to do it. So the cool thing about having state in this game as well is it means that they might even be able to boost Erik further by saving him even more money because he doesn't have to invest into many prelates. Because what you can have instead, although it's not as fast as the Rus interaction, you could have state very early because remember, as the Delhi, you get access to your religious people right now and you want to build them for the research. He could drag a few of those out to nearby relics to his location and return them and just drop them off at Erik's base as tribute. Another cool thing to think about, by the way, is that with the assistance of the HRE on the water, you're actually covered quite well into feudal as Ether fans here. Because the thing about the first age, when you're in Dark Age, obviously Delhi reigns supreme because they're the only civ that they have fishing boats that fire. But then the follow-up is that Erik should be the first to go up into feudal, which means that he should be able to be on the waterfront with like attack boats, right, and arrow ships. And the cool detail to think about with this situation is also one thing I've seen out of HRE players time and time again, these matchups with hybrid water maps, they can afford double dock before anyone else in the game. And that could give you the edge that just can't be matched. Because although BlackWidow can build faster out of those docks, because that's one of China's perks, you don't really have that same oomph, right? You also have an Abbasid player that just feels like a liability on the waterfront. Because although Abbasids and the Delhi both suck when it comes to the waterfront in like Feudal Castle, the difference is the Delhi at least get the booster in Dark Age. So a little bit of pressure early on. Scouts were moving out, trying to snipe the best they can. Council halls are being built. I believe on both sides they should be about matched. In fact, if we check out Revnak. Oh, wow. Revnak? No, look at this. This is a total switch. Kelazhur, he didn't go into the water at all. He sacrificed going in the water. In fairness, it's a very long walk. And remember, if you want to go for the water trade, or not trade, but food gathering, although it is a benefit 5-10 minutes down the line, you delay your feudal timing by an extra 2-3 minutes. So Kelazhur is going to be vastly ahead of England here, and he's going to look to move longbows across and snipe out all the fishing economies. The cool thing about this, like, is it works so great in conjunction with the Delhi. So what you can actually have now is State can roll through a few of these fishing boats, right? And if you need to replace them, the HRE player can potentially like cover you, pay you a little bit of wood if you really want to go min-maxing. But the more important detail is as you move in along the waterfront to block your opponent off, on land, Kelazhur can raid in and kill all these ships. And it looks like he's going to have to because they already walled up. I like this play out of BlackWidow. Remember, China, they build a lot faster. So he blocks the strait, and it's going to take a long time for the Delhi fishing boats to get through this because, remember, the damage is reduced by 50 on each shot, and you don't even shoot in instances. So it takes you like 3 times as long as it would take Dows to get through this. While that's underway, Erik, very delayed on his tech up, but that is because he went to the fishing fleet himself, right? And this will pay dividends down the line for him. He could even afford a second dock if he wants. I think they're maybe going to leave a little bit of wiggle room in case Kelazhur wants to hop on the front. I don't necessarily see Kelazhur going onto the sea in this one. I think he's just going to look to pivot hard into farms after he gets through this initial group of deer right next to his base. And that's a very easy transition for England, right? I think an overlooked detail quite often for them that people always seem to just forget is that their farms cost half the price. So it's not just the fact that you want to be on them due to the way that mills work, right, given that increased harvest rate. It's the fact that pivoting into farms, there isn't a single civ in the game that has it easier to do, right? I've even seen builds that are feasible where people literally extract one sheep and then build farms. It's not what I call optimal, but it's feasible to do without gaps in your economy. Dome of Faith being built. Second person up is going to be Erik as expected. So far, it's just all Ethan fans making it up ahead. That's finally going to start being matched as BlackWidow will match this. And BlackWidow, what did he do back in it? Wait. Okay, he went Imperial Academy. I wouldn't mind seeing him drop a Barbican his son over on this corner, but not really needed now that the outpost is going down. Remember, these outposts are powerful, by the way. And look at this move out of Revnak. He's going to cover the strait. He doesn't want to expose this at all. A lot of players would have only covered this summon side, and they would have left them itself exposed, right? Because Revnak already has a villager out here, and you want the outpost in position for the attack speed as England. He's going to cover the corner. Because otherwise, what could have easily happened here is one of the northern players, one of the teammates of Ethan fans, could have ran over here, dropped an outpost in the corner. You wouldn't have been able to snipe it with this outpost, and your entire fishing economy would have been moot. Revnak up into feudal now. Just 2 players remaining, and it is the Abbasids and the Delhi. And they will be more or less matched. Decent timing, actually, for the Abbasid player, considering how much slower you are, right? Like, you have a fixed 2 minutes. You can't speed that up at all. So the question is, what's the play for State now? I would like to see him just play straight into castle as quickly as possible. That is incredibly greedy when you've got an HRE player as well, right? The logic behind it being you want compound of the defender. If you get compound of the defender, you're able to wall up these central areas. You can play towards the sacred sites. You can begin to pressure, get them off the water. The other cool thing that you have to keep in mind that you have on both sides in this game that could come into play via compound defender and via China is walling, right? So for Delhi, they can have military units build stone walls if they get compound defender. Meanwhile, on the other side, when we talk about China, of course, one of the big things they have is increased build speeds. So they're able to drop walls quickly. And the reason this matters is when we look at the players on the northern side of each team. England with 7 range on their lombos. If you put them on walls, it goes up to 9. Now, quick walling isn't that easy as England. It's very hard to actually get in position to do it quick enough. But when you add in this layer, right, this is another example of those kind of complementary elements to Civs. When you have China or you have Delhi, you have accessibility to aggressive walling. And that will allow you to snipe out very effectively and even pressure much earlier into the game than you'd usually see in a 3-on-3. Meanwhile, Waterfront continues to scale up quite nicely. If we look at the income right now, yeah, so I think Stay is the one that I'm looking towards right now. Erik, of course, is always going to have impressive numbers. State's doing a decent job. You can see he's got surplus. He is rushing up like we talked about. So it's all about unlocking compound of the defender, not really about the bagglers. A few boom shoots would be nice, but if he starts playing the bagglers, I'm going to start headbutting my keyboard. It is the worst attack ship in the game next to the Galliuses. But the French at least have the excuse that they get the Hulks early, so they don't really care. But yes, if you ever find yourself playing as Abyss's in Delhi and you have to resort to the bagglers for any naval combat, I would recommend typing GG and leaving. The reason being is they're just not that effective because although the Hulks do all their damage in one hit, same with the Warjunks, the way that the bagglers are designed is they're meant to do 100 damage still, but it's split into 50 damage and then 5 instances of 10. That sounds cool until you realize the way that damage reduction works. So for example, this building having 50 range resistance means your bagler does 1 damage with Blister Shot and then 1 damage with 5 instances. This Dow right here having 4 range resistance means that you do 46 damage with the first shot from the blister, and then you have to take 4 away from each of those 5 instances of damage, right? Which means you're missing out on 20 damage there, 24 damage overall. That's a huge dent compared to the Hulk that just loses 4 damage in that shot. So yeah, Bagler's really funky. I see where the devs were coming from with their design. It just doesn't work in like execution, right? It's just a very pathetically weak unit. While Hulks are able to, for example, siege down buildings, siege down docks, because there's only 50 on missile resistance, they still do 50 damage per shot. A Bagler literally has no potential to do that at all. And I think, although you can argue Delhi still has advantages elsewhere, I think the one that got hurt hardest by that design choice was the Abyssids. The Abyssids that, you know, people are starting to find a place with, but I don't think they're going to find a place on the water anytime soon, if ever. So Tech Ops, once again, even fans ahead. And we've reached that point, and all the relics have already been banked. I don't think they utilized that element we were talking about where they send State out as well. They just had Erik fully invest in it, which he should be doing, right? Like, the State choice is a last resort. State is the frontline player to the south, so you want him to have a military quicker. You don't want him to have to spend extra resources on getting these scholars out. It just would have been an efficient play from the perspective of, like, you pay less for your religious units than the HRE do. But I think overall, looks like 1, 2... and I think he has maybe got a third. Maybe not. Maybe just like use 2 to gather the same. Something a lot of players don't seem to do, by the way, is you should pull your Arkham Chapel guy out and start running to a new relic when you've got your returning relic close by, right? So your relic can just switch places with him. It's a little bit more efficient. And look at this. Straight into Pass of Swabia, miles ahead of the competition. And no signs of being matched either. This is the power. This is where Erik comes online, and it's so cool to see the HRE booming on a map other than Hill and Dale. And this map does have some open potential, but there's just no aggression. And any aggression that there could have been was going to be buffered away by Kelazhur's choice to rush straight into Feudal instead of going on the water. And that's why Revnak feels pretty useless right now. England does bounce back, interestingly, in a hyper late game situation quite effectively. But I don't see this going hyper late game. I think this is going to be a mid-game decider. Because Erik's too strong right now to not try and push this advantage. Definitely not an optimal choice to begin with, though, trying to take on outposts with Galley. Remember, guys, these outposts get bonus damage against ships, plus 25, in fact, on top of their 10. So, yeah, you disappear quite fast when you try to engage them. Just trying to get the... I like to have that fine point where we can check vision on both sides. So right now, Kelazhur dropping the outpost we talked about. And he's going to actually prevent Revnak from gathering a lot in the north. This actually punishes him hard. In the mirror matchup, right, between these two England players, the difference just got bigger. Because you know that Revnak's going to be up here, right? He's the northern player. So it's likely he's taking the more defensive, further up river side of things, while the rest of the river belongs to China and then the Iaguzes, where they'll compete on the front. And here it is, Kelazhur, that force we talked about. So many longbows already. Meanwhile, Revnak, his military force is pathetic. He's on 14 right now, all because he wanted to be greedy. And this is punishment well-deserved. This is a concern I have when I see these type of choices being made by players. Who is your greed and who is your, like, sacrifice, right? Kelazhur is willing to sacrifice his early mid-game, recover later, but in the meantime set the tempo. Meanwhile, when I look across at Genesis Gaming, I see no similar comparative. They are all greedy. There's 3 TCs for BlackWidow. Meanwhile, Revnak has gone greedily up in the castle already. And your third player is an Abbasid who has spammed Lancers. No spears or anything of the kind. So everything about this screams greed. And it means you're about to surrender 2/3 of the map across to Ethan fans because they understood their roles better, right? State was given necessary greed to get castle, and then he ramps in straight away. Erik is given wiggle room to be as greedy as he possibly wants. He's the HRE player. And Kelazhur enables all of this with his selflessness with his build, still being stuck in feudal and not looking like he's going to go castle anytime soon. And while he won't go castle, he already finds plenty of value due to this outpost network that he invested in, right? With the early longbow army preventing your opponents. And now this. Here comes the quick walls and the towers. This is the power. State has reached that point. The Delhi able to do this courtesy of the compound defender, and now they're going to starve you off the food front. And you invested a lot in this, remember. There's a lot of docks here. You have to add 150 to each of them. The outposts being invested as well. On top of that, we then also have to talk about all the fishing boats that cost 75 wood each. This is such a huge sink for them to lose. And I don't feel like they recouped their losses yet. They didn't do a few more minutes for this to feel good. Being sniped out like this is cursed. It's maximum pain. And really well played by Kelazhur, just dive in like that and snipe out so many of the boats. Meanwhile, on the north, dock now down, boom ships coming out. Erik is going to get them off the water entirely. And I love that sneak in. A lot of players would have tried to weave upriver. That's just going to waste a lot of time, especially when BlackWidow drops walls like this. Instead, you bypass the problem, you come around from both sides, and in the next 2 minutes, there's going to be nothing left of Genesis's dock front. And this, yeah, well, I mean, I said I was going to mash my head against the keyboard. I'm pretty sure Niroxs is going to be mashing his own head against the keyboard at the end of this one. He invested in the bagless. These units are just giant piles of trash and water. I don't know why war junks and junks are called that when they're not junk. This should have been called junk because it will do nothing for you in this game. And instead, you're already pinned in a corner. Look at this. The sniping's coming from the Stonewall Tower means you have nowhere to run. Sacred Site being capped in the center. They need to get on the southern one. Nice move by BlackWidow, getting down the walls early to prevent that, though. I'm glad to see I'm not the only one that usually refers to these as battlers. I think calling them poopy ships is also just acceptable, if you really want to be childish about it. They have pretty sails, though. I mean, I'm not going to lie, if we ever get into cosmetics for Age of Empires 4, you can get some cool designs on these, but that's probably the only value they're going to have. And, well, you don't even need to pressure right now, I don't think. There's no rush. Kelazhur can choose to catch up if he wants. He's doing exactly that. He's going to drop a secondary TC, and he can very quickly just go into the King's Palace and then boom past his England counterpart. His England counterpart that is now investing heavily into Lombos, and you have to question to what end. Boom ship in. Nice move there out of Revnak. Good value. Half of State's troops just get sunk like that. And State, did he make the mistake that I think he did? So many players do this and it hurts me. Yep, no Forced March. Forced March is such an incredible tool in the Delhi arsenal. You should be rushing to get access to it. It is absolutely fantastic because unit displacement is always like an overwhelming advantage in strategy games, right? If you're able to shift out of an uncomfortable situation in the blink of an eye, why would you not invest in that? Doubling your speed up to over 2 tiles per second for 10 seconds? I expect more players to start utilizing this as they experiment with Delhi more. As Delhi gets their bugs creased out and more people want to play it, you're going to see a lot of players optimize this, where they spend half of the Forced March duration not running in and then gap closed at the last second to annihilate for maximum efficiency. Boom ships continuing on their way. And these are explosive tech boom ships. So it's not as much boom ships as it is nuclear deployment at this stage. And this is where you start to hold them hostage. Erik He's going to cover the crossing, so you no longer have access to the central island. You weren't going to access on the southern side anyway. There's too much crap here. Erik even went into a Carrack to try and get through the walls and block them off here. Cool play. Carrack's really not that great, though. These Carracks suck. They are... Well, okay, suck is a harsh word. They're no Baoshuan, but you don't have Baoshuans, right? So I guess I'll accept it. I'm trying to remember. I think Zebex are better, but you don't want to have your Delhi player sidestep on that. He has to invest on the land front. And only one of these is needed. Even a Carrack is good enough to hold the front. Nothing compares to Baoshuans, by the way. Baoshuans are god tier, but I don't think we're ever going to see a point where BlackWidow can prove that. Even though he's Imperial Age, he has no control on the waterfront. Meanwhile, in the north, walling up will occur. Well, this isn't really the optimization that Synergy was talking about, where BlackWidow would drop walls for his longbow friend. Instead, it's just please stay out my base walls. And he obliges him. He says, "Okay, I'll go into BlackWidow's base instead. How about that?" Boom, cannons are here. Walls being built. Walls for the longbowman to stand on. We talked about this before. Kelazhur still only having them in the feudal is finally up at castle and able to upgrade them. It wouldn't even matter though. They already have the advantage of being on walls, right? And he sets up even more walls on the side. He's going to block out Revnak. Revnak having no options available to him here. And the bombards are in onto the primary TC. Fire Lancers trying to ride out. They will be picked apart fast here, though. Riding in from the west. Niroxs arriving with the Vet Horseman as well. Looking to engage and move past onto the Lombos. War Elephant is in deep. Backing up here. No pillings being dropped just yet out of Kelazhur. He doesn't want to stand still. He doesn't want to get peppered by the Lombos on the other side. So he will be forced back for the moment. But not many horsemen left. Bombards can turn around as well. They can start to get rid of these heavy cavalry, or these light cavalry rather, and then at that stage you can trade out evenly with the longbows. And that should be the difference maker right now. Once the cav's gone, there's no way to get through Erik's siege line. And then Erik can just return to do it again. And look what he's got behind him! He hasn't even moved the main force forward yet. He's got Mangonels in play now. And finally, he realizes that Revnak's like, oh no. No, I'm out deep. I'm too deep. A few Fire Lancers trying to pick apart a Bombard or two, but it's not going to be good enough. And now, with your Longbowman out of place and the rest of the siege coming in, it looks like Ethan are here to stay. You can tell they're Ethan fans. HRE really at the center of this strategy, being complemented by the English side. I really felt like they had a much clearer idea of what they wanted to do. The only thing I see when I look at Genesis Gaming's lineup is like they want to make this cute play with quick walling and then put Lombos on top. I don't see the logic behind the Abbasids in this composition, at least by the way they played it. They played an ultra greedy style. We've talked about how you have to have this balance, this give and take, right? The only time you get away with maximum greed on all of you is when your opponent is doing the same. But there's no way that's going to happen, right? Like, you have to understand that when you have HRE in Delhi, you're going to be paranoid as Ethan fans here that you have to have Kelazhur playing sacrificial. And it really has made the difference here. It's allowed them to just get to this stage. And now with an army of 10 Bombards and more walls going up, there's no easy play that Genesis can make to get back in this game. And watch how quickly these Bombards can snipe out all these units. Turn and fire. Turn and burn. Mangonel fire in, has to retreat away. BlackWidow want to join in, but there's no point now. Yes, he has elite Fire Lancers, but they do not last long against this many Bombards, especially if Erik is on point with the micro. And more TCs being expanded. The problem I have with this is you have limited ground, right? You're booming up like this as England trying to recover. China has already boomed up the TC front. You're being funneled into less than a third of the map. You're going to run out of resources quick, so you need a game plan. You need a way out, or this is just going to snowball into an easy victory for Ethan fans. These Fire Lancers. There's no easy raid either. Stone walls were denied, actually, so they weren't fully completed. And BlackWidow got his walls down. But you can see more walls now going up from state. He's not going to give easy access. And if you ride in with this Lancer army, you're going to leave your teammates to die, right? Like, you need all three of you here to defend this. And it's coming. Bombards and Mangonels. And you could lose that Longbow army in the blink of an eye, especially if you get baited in like this. But Bombard's in. Clock Tower will be siege through first. No siege weapons coming out for China. And China trying to ride up the river and into the enemy economy now. Question is, are you really going to be quick enough? Carrack moves across. Remember, this has a little bit of splash to it. So you'll lose a few of these Fire Lancers. You can see siege them down one by one. And they have to still get through the passe walls on either side. The concern is what's going to be happening in your base, though. Bombards are moving in again. Tries to be rebuilding the Fire Lancers back in base. Niroxs is threatening on the flank with the Horsemen and the Lancers, but there's just so many bombards. As long as Erik is ridiculously godly on the micro, there is no way you approach this and don't lose your entire army. And look at this, they tank it with the Elephant. The War Elephant doesn't give a damn. The Spears are here to buffer you off, and once again you're forced back. But now you're in. More racks being built, more troops to come out for State. State sitting right now almost pop cap, but he's about to build up a defense force. And this is a Hail Mary out of BlackWidow. He needs to get through the landmarks quickly here. It's a decent amount of Lancers, but let's see how long it lasts. Because it has to last long enough to get through all of these landmarks. Erik pushing in again. A little bit hesitant to go too deep here. Has the Mangonels at the ready. Fire Lancers moving in on the first of the bombards. They're stacking those Mangonel shots! They're in! BlackWidow, no! He can't micro it. He's too busy focusing on the raid in the enemy base. He loses the defense force, and he just gave the keys to his base over to Erik. Straight in on the primary TC. Longbow's falling back once more, trying to get through the last landmarks. There's still one to get through, and he's blocking him. Spearman now coming out from Kelazhur. There's not enough Fire Lancers left on the forward front. The repairs coming out in the Dome of Faith means that BlackWidow's attempt is going to be a fail. And now he is in dire straits. The villagers charge out into the bombards. Erik dives them in deep. That's going to force an engagement. Niroxs now, he's the second to go into the Mangonel line. What is it with horses attracting rockfire? And they will just be decimated in the face of the siege line from Erik. Enough elephants are here to plow through as well. The commitment coming out for longbows. They're next to hit, strike, and get dove deep by the Mangonels as they will lose half their count. Half of them barely limping away. And how many have we still got in the front? How many siege weapons are here? 6 Mangonels, 10 of these bombards. And with the front line of elephants, they are not done anytime soon. They're going to dive deeper. And a raid attempt. It was a nice effort by BlackWidow. I like the idea. I'm behind it. If it works, you're back in this game. But the failure to micro on the home front, the dive deep punished by the Mangonels that you know are there, is going to be the fatal error that will cost him his base. Trying to rebuild into the Fire Lancers right now, trying to look for a way to hold, but another landmark's going to fall. They could even turn right onto Revnak. Revnak, he's running out of places to run. There's an edge of a map here, and last time I checked, there's no option to go to someone else's. You wish you could, though. You wish you were not in this game. The Mangonels are picking you apart. And right in by the Fire Lancers again. Once again, the kryptonite is rocks falling from the sky. Longbows back up. Fire Lancer army is spent once more. The bombard's still standing. You've got barely anything left here. They just need to find the Spirit Way, and you're going to be out because the Imperial Palace is about to crumble. Well, they're in denial. This is their final game. So they're going to see it out to the end, but with no clear way back in and about to lose BlackWidow. I don't see a recovery point. And this is the punishment that you sow, right? When you show this much greed, when you have every player in your team playing some sort of greedy style, no one willing to sacrifice, hang in the feudal, and buy time to cover that greed, this is where it leads. Capitalism is fun, but too much of it leads to bankruptcy, my friends. You devalued your own value in the late game when you had no one to protect it. And as a result, with this push in, it's all but done. And that will mean a 2-0 victory for Ethan fans because there is no way back. The Mangonels never stop. There's never a need for a forward base either. This has just been siege weapons slowly rolling across the battlefield. That is how efficient Erik has been. He has barely been losing any of these. The additional health, the movement speed, always able to kite them. And with the assistance of State, always standing guard on top of him. And the threat of Kelazhur's Longbows reigning supreme, they will reign supreme here on Danube River. As they will take this series 2-0 and kick Genesis Gaming out of the tournament before they can even make it to the main event. What a game coming out. Ethan fans 2-0-ing Genesis. Well, this series, it might not have went the full length, but I definitely think it delivered. It showed some interesting things. Game 1 was especially enjoyable to watch, showing you how the small differences, even a mirror matchup, can make the world of differences in the outcome. And I think this game really kind of push the importance of balancing your greed. You can't just all in like this. Every single one that point to me the player on Genesis Gaming that wasn't being greedy there. Niroxs was hard on the fishing fleet, no military presence early, waited all the way till Lancers. God, my hair won't get out of the way. Then we talk about BlackWidow. He's expected to be the greed factor. He has to be. He wants to get the Fire Lancers. Fire Lancers are insanely bulked. If not that, at least Yuan Dynasty, so you have the mobility and the fluidity to chase everyone down. And then we round it out with Revnak. Revnak, the biggest question mark of all. I don't know if it's necessarily on him screwing the pooch with his greed as much as it is getting outdone by the selflessness of Kelazhur. But Kelazhur, really the highlight of this game, getting down those early outposts and building a huge influx of longbows to snipe out. This is something you should be doing in this game, guys. When you talk about water hybrid maps, if no one is covering the greed and you're all just building fishing boats, you're all greedy in that situation. Because it means that you're going to have so much value as one player playing early aggressive feudal because there's so many exposed fishing boats that can't be protected. And Kelazhur, quick to identify that, moves in with like, what, 20, 30 longbow, snipes out as many fishing boats in the end and gives them the edge, shutting down the economy and preventing that scaling that if it was there, maybe BlackWidow's able to get the amassment of Fire Lancers that turns this game. But instead, it's all about Erik, that slow siege, and just covering him as they put a dent in the greed player's base, right? And that's all that matters, is the fact that because they're all being greed, there's not this protectorate, there's not this threat, right? Usually in these 3-on-3s, it's very dangerous to dive in on the center player, right? Because you worry about being flanked right and left at the same time. We've seen this especially on Dry Arabia. But in this game, when you understand that all three of those players are playing onto the dock front, there is no one being that threatening at that stage of the game. It gives you that foothold from which you're never pushed out and gives them a win here. 2-0 to get Genesis Gaming out of this tournament. Really well played by them.